Over 2 million New Yorkers are served every day by human service providers. It's the daycare center or the senior center down the block. It's housing for the homeless, clinics for the mentally ill or physically ill, second language courses for immigrants. The gamut of human services is huge, and I would bet that you or someone you know is impacted by a human service provider. Just imagine what the city would be like without human services.
Not only are nonprofits serving those most in need, they're also an economic engine in the communities they serve and to the state as a whole, as an employer and consumer. 27,000 nonprofits in New York State provide over 1 million jobs and stimulate business with the purchase of over $1 billion in goods and services to support their programs. As employers, human service providers are an important rung in the career ladder in many struggling communities, as a source of local employment where few may exist, and as they frequently hire former clients. Not only do millions of New Yorkers depend on human services daily, but New York's economy does too.
Many families in New York City rely on free or subsidized childcare and after-school programs to provide supervision for their children. Many of these programs will help determine whether or not a parent either stays or exits the workforce. Research shows that young mothers who receive child care assistance are 40% more likely to be employed after 2 years than those mothers who do not. This is just one example of how human services serve as job supports and help tackle the barriers to gainful employment.
77% of New Yorkers living in poverty are adult women or children, and 2/3 of the city's poor families are headed by women. Many programs such as childcare, senior centers, homeless services, and family health programs are particularly important to women who rely on them to support their work and family lives. Since the recession began, there's been a 72% increase in domestic violence cases across the Northeast, and a 24% increase in just the last 2 years in domestic violence homicides in New York. Yet prevention programs continue to be cut or face the threat of cuts. Restoring funding for essential human services programs is important to help women fight poverty, flee abuse, and build better lives for their families and themselves.
Statistics in New York demonstrate that people of color have higher rates of families who live in poverty, and they face many poverty-related issues, like higher rates of homelessness and domestic violence, and lower access to quality health care and education programs. We need human services, not only to help promote racial equity, but also to help equalize economic disparity by providing people in poverty with skills and resources they direly need to survive and to pull themselves out of poverty.
The fiscal crisis has had a major impact on the availability of human services in New York. And this is at a time when need is up significantly. We have record rates of poverty, homelessness, and hunger in this state. Yet, the amount of dollars that go into these services has decreased at the same time, with philanthropic dollars down and government pulling out resources left and right. At the state level, we've lost over $800 million over the last 2 years, not to mention the $2.7 billion in Medicaid cuts that we've seen. At the local level, governments have been cutting back as well. In New York City, they've cut $165 million over the last 2 fiscal years, and in November of 2011, they cut an additional $181 million from human services, and there are more cuts on the horizon. Human services allow people to move forward with their lives, to get out of poverty and into the middle class permanently. Add your voice to the growing chorus of people that are saying, we need to invest in human services and keep the commitments to our communities.